My rich fiancé tried to bribe me to keep quiet about his affairs, so I exposed everything at our engagement party. Hi Reddit, you won't believe the circus I've been living in, and it all started with a ring and a smile that looked too good to be true. Spoiler alert, it was. Let me tell you about how my entire life got turned upside down by a rich guy, a bunch of money, and the kind of drama that would make The Real Housewives seem like a children's show. Buckle up because this ride is wild. So I, 26F, got engaged to this guy, Trevor, 30M. On the surface, Trevor was everything a girl could dream of. Tall, dark, and handsome, with a bank account that could fund a small country. He's one of those old money types, think East Coast, Ivy League, and a family estate that looks like it should have its own zip code. I, on the other hand, grew up in a completely different world. My family is pure middle class, suburban bliss. My mom, Kathy, 52F, is a teacher, and my dad, Bob, 54M, runs a small auto repair shop. They're the salt of the earth, the kind of people who save every coupon and make their own coffee at home, because Starbucks is a luxury. Let me give you a bit of backstory about my family, because that's where some of the cracks in this fairy tale started to show. Growing up, we weren't poor, but money was always tight. My dad worked long hours at the shop, and my mom picked up every side gig she could find, tutoring, babysitting, even cleaning houses to make sure my brother, Ethan, 28M, and I had everything we needed. We were happy, but there was always this undercurrent of stress about finances. My brother, Ethan, is the golden child. He was the star athlete, the one who got the full-ride scholarship to a big-name college, the one who everyone said would make it big. And he did, sort of. He ended up in finance, working for some fancy firm in New York. But the pressure of living up to everyone's expectations took its toll. And he started spiraling, drinking too much, getting into fights, you name it. Eventually, he got himself fired for some shady deal he got caught up in, and he came back home with his tail between his legs. That's when things started to get complicated. My parents, especially my mom, started putting all their hopes on me. They wanted me to marry well. And when I met Trevor, they thought their prayers had been answered. They were so blinded by his wealth and charm that they ignored all the red flags. And trust me, there were plenty. Trevor and I met at a charity gala. One of those stuffy, overpriced events where everyone pretends they care about the cause, but really just want to rub elbows with the right people. I was there as a +1 for my boss, who didn't want to show up single, and Trevor was there because, well, it's just what people like him do. We hit it off, exchanged numbers, and before I knew it, we were dating. I'm not gonna lie. At first, it was like living in a fairy tale. Weekend trips to the Hamptons, dinners at restaurants where the prices aren't even listed on the menu, and gifts that made my jaw drop. My friends couldn't believe it, and I have to admit, neither could I. But as time went on, I started to notice things that didn't sit right with me. Little comments Trevor made, the way he talked about people who weren't from his circle, and how he seemed to think money could solve any problem. But the real crack started to show when Trevor met my family. I thought introducing him to my parents would be a good thing, a chance for them to see the man I was going to marry, to understand why I was so in love with him. But it turned out to be a disaster. My dad, Bob, is as blue collar as they come. He's proud of the work he does, even if it's not glamorous, and he's the kind of guy who doesn't mince words. When Trevor showed up to dinner in a designer suit and started talking about his latest investments, I could see my dad's face harden. He didn't like Trevor, and he didn't try to hide it. Trevor, on the other hand, was completely oblivious. He kept going on about the new golf course his family was building, the art collection his mother was curating, and the small investment he'd just made in a tech startup. My dad just stared at him, barely touching his food, while my mom tried to smooth things over by gushing about how wonderful Trevor was. After dinner, my dad pulled me aside and told me point blank that he didn't trust Trevor. He said the guy was all flash and no substance, and that I was making a mistake. My mom, of course, was furious. She accused my dad of being jealous, of not wanting to see me happy. It turned into a huge fight, and I ended up leaving in tears, with Trevor looking smug as ever, like he'd just won some kind of battle. And that was just the beginning. As Trevor and I got more serious, the tension between him and my family only grew. My brother Ethan, who was still living at home and trying to get his life back on track, hated Trevor from the get-go. He said Trevor was a snob, that he looked down on us, and that I was selling out by being with him. But the worst was my mom. She was so blinded by Trevor's wealth that she started pushing me to marry him, even when I wasn't sure I wanted to. I remember one particularly awful dinner where Trevor made some offhand comment about how some people just don't have the drive to succeed, and I saw Ethan's face turn red. He snapped back, saying that not everyone had a trust fund to fall back on, and things escalated from there. Before I knew it, Ethan had thrown his drink in Trevor's face, and Trevor was threatening to have him taken care of. My mom screamed at Ethan, telling him he was a failure and that he was ruining my future, while my dad just sat there, silent and fuming. Reddit, let me tell you, money can't buy class, and it sure as hell can't buy a conscience. But Trevor? He was convinced it could buy both. Now, here's where things start to get even messy, eh? Fast forward a year, and we're planning our engagement party. Well, his family is planning it, and I'm just the guest of honor. Trevor's mom, Linda, 56F, is the epitome of a wasp. You know the type. She has a personal shopper at Saks, drinks gin martinis at lunch, and her charity work is more about photo ops than philanthropy. She was thrilled when Trevor proposed, but she made it clear that I needed to adjust to their lifestyle. Her exact words? "You'll have to learn how to be one of us, dear." Okay, Linda, whatever that means. Anyway, as we're knee-deep in engagement party planning, I start noticing that Trevor is acting strange. He's on his phone constantly, always stepping out of the room to take calls, and he's suddenly super interested in my schedule, like he needs to know where I'm going to be and when. I brushed it off as stress from planning the party, which, by the way, was shaping up to be an event that could rival a royal wedding. But then I started getting this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. One day, I decided to do something I never thought I would. I snooped. Now, I'm not proud of it, but sometimes a girl's gotta do what a girl's gotta do. I went through his phone while he was in the shower, and what I found nearly made me throw up. Texts. So many texts. And not just to one girl, but multiple girls. Some of them were pretty graphic, too. Things I won't repeat here, but let's just say they were bad enough to make me question every single thing about our relationship. He was hooking up with these girls while we were planning our engagement party, while he was telling me he loved me, while I was busy trying to figure out what shade of white I wanted my wedding dress to be. I was furious. Like Sired, can't think straight, about to burn it all down furious. But I didn't confront him right away. Oh no, that would have been too easy. Instead, I decided to play the long game, and that's where the real fun begins. For the next few weeks, I acted like nothing was wrong. I was the perfect fiancé, smiling, planning, and even pretending to be excited about the party. Meanwhile, I was gathering evidence. Screenshots of the texts, dates and times of his little rendezvous, and even some juicy tidbits from the girls he was cheating with. Yep, I reached out to them, pretending to be someone else, and got them to spill everything. Turns out Trevor wasn't just a cheater. He was a lying, manipulative scumbag who had no intention of ever being faithful. As if this whole thing wasn't enough of a betrayal, I started realizing just how deep Trevor's deception ran. He wasn't just sneaking around with random girls. He was carrying on full-blown relationships with these women. There was Tiffany, 24F, a yoga instructor who apparently thought Trevor was single and planning to propose to her any day now. Then there was Ashley, 28F, a model, and I use that term loosely, who loved to post about the luxurious gifts Trevor would shower her with. Gifts that I never saw, by the way. And let's not forget about Jessica, 29F, a divorced mother of two who was convinced Trevor was going to leave me for her because, according to her, they had a special connection. Special connection, my ass. The day of the engagement party arrived, and I was ready. Reddit? I was so ready. The party was at Trevor's family estate, a sprawling mansion with perfectly manicured lawns, a catering staff that probably outnumbered the guests, and enough flowers to make a florist faint. I was dressed to kill, and I mean that literally. I wore a dress that made me look like $1,000,000. Not that I needed to, but it was all part of the plan, and I had a smile plastered on my face that could have fooled anyone. As the party was in full swing, with everyone sipping champagne and toasting to our love, I excused myself to freshen up. Instead, I made my way to the estate's grand ballroom, where the party was set to move later in the evening. I'd already arranged for the AV team to have a special slideshow ready, something I told them was a surprise for Trevor. And boy, was it ever! Once everyone was gathered in the ballroom, with Linda practically bursting with pride and Trevor grinning like the Cheshire Cat, I took the microphone. Thank you all for being here tonight. I began, my voice steady and confident. It means so much to Trevor and me to have our friends and family celebrate our love. But before we go any further, I have a little surprise for Trevor. A slideshow, if you will, of some of our most intimate moments. The lights dimmed, and the slideshow began. But instead of pictures of us looking all lovey-dovey, what flashed on the screen were screenshots of his texts. All of his texts. The entire room went silent, and then came the gasps. Trevor's face went from confused to horrified in about 2 seconds flat, and I couldn't help but relish every moment of it. The best part? I narrated the whole thing. Here's Trevor telling one of his friends how he's just going through the motions until he can figure out how to get out of this engagement without losing too much money. Oh, and here's Trevor meeting up with another girl the night he told me he was at a business dinner. Isn't it just precious how he lies so effortlessly? I didn't hold back. I exposed everything. Every lie, every affair, every disgusting little detail. By the time I was done, Linda looked like she was going to faint, and Trevor, well, let's just say he wasn't smiling anymore. But it didn't end there. You see, Trevor's family is all about reputation. They live and breathe it. So when I dropped the final bombshell that I'd sent the entire slideshow to the family's closest business partners, their church community, and the local gossip rags, it was like watching a nuclear explosion in real time. The fallout was immediate. Trevor's dad, Richard, 58M, who had been silent throughout the whole thing, finally spoke up and demanded I leave. But not before I got one last dig in. Don't worry, Richard. I'm leaving, but but I'll make sure everyone remembers this night. After all, it's not every day you get to see the mighty fall. And with that, I walked out of that mansion, head held high, and never looked back. Update 1. So, after the engagement party from hell, I decided to take a little break from everything. I packed a bag, hopped on a plane, and spent a few weeks in Europe, just me, myself, and I. Let me tell you, there's nothing like wandering through the streets of Paris and sipping wine in Tuscany to help you forget about a cheating ex-fiancé. But, of course, the drama didn't stay behind in the States. Nope, it followed me across the Atlantic. Apparently, after I left, Linda tried to do some serious damage control. She went into full-on spin mode, telling anyone who would listen that I was unstable and jealous, and that I had fabricated the whole thing to ruin Trevor's life. Nice try, Linda, but the receipts don't lie. And neither did the girls Trevor was cheating with, who were all too happy to spill the beans when they found out he'd been lying to them too. But here's where things get even more ridiculous. Remember Jessica, the divorced mom Trevor was seeing? Well, she decided that the best way to get back at him was to go public with their entire affair. She wrote this long, tearful Facebook post about how she'd been duped by Trevor, how she thought he was going to leave me for her, and how heartbroken she was when she found out the truth. The post went viral, like really viral. And of course, it didn't take long for the media to pick up on it. Suddenly, Trevor wasn't just the guy who got humiliated at his own engagement party. He was a full-blown scandal. The tabloids had a field day with it, splashing headlines like "Billionaire Son Exposed in Cheating Scandal" and "Engagement Party from Hell," the inside story, across their front pages. My phone was blowing up with calls and texts from people I hadn't heard from in years, all wanting the juicy details. And then there was Trevor's family. Oh, Reddit, you should have seen the mess that unfolded. Linda was on a warpath, trying to shut down the story any way she could. She called in every favor, hired a PR firm, and even tried to get an injunction to stop the tabloids from publishing more stories. But it was too late. The damage was done. Their precious reputation was in tatters, and there was no coming back from it. Trevor, on the other hand, went into hiding. I heard from mutual friends, yes, I still have a few, that he's been staying at a family retreat in the mountains, which is code for he's been sent to lick his wounds and plot his next move. Good luck with that, Trev. You're gonna need it. Update 2. So, remember how I said Trevor's family is obsessed with reputation? Well, it turns out my little stunt at the engagement party did more damage than I realized. Not only did their social circle turn on them, but some of Richard's business partners started pulling out of deals. Apparently, being associated with a family embroiled in a cheating scandal isn't great for business. Who knew? But wait, it gets better. Richard, in his infinite wisdom, decided to sue me for defamation. He claimed that I had ruined their family's good name and caused irreparable harm to their reputation. Now, I'm no legal expert, but even I know that you can't sue someone for telling the truth, especially when you've got the receipts to back it up. So, I lawyered up, countersued for emotional distress, and went to war. The trial was a spectacle, to say the least. The courtroom was packed with people, journalists, gawkers, and, of course, the vultures from the local gossip columns. Linda showed up in her best pearls, trying to look like the picture of dignity, while Trevor skulked in the back, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might recognize him. The whole thing was a farce, and it didn't take long for the judge to see through it. In the days leading up to the trial, I started getting calls from some of Trevor's other exes. It turns out I wasn't the first woman he'd cheated on, nor was I the first woman to find herself on the receiving end of Linda's manipulative, controlling behavior. One woman, Caroline, 34F, told me how Linda had practically forced her to sign an NDA after her relationship with Trevor ended, just to keep the family's name out of the mud. Another, Serena, 27F, described how Linda had tried to bribe her into leaving Trevor when she got too serious for their liking. So much for learning how to be one of them. Huh, Linda? With their help, I was able to build a pretty damning case. By the time we got to court, I had a stack of affidavits from women who'd been burned by Trevor and his family, each one detailing how they'd been lied to, manipulated, and in some cases even threatened into silence. It was the kind of evidence that made even the most hardened legal teams squirm. But the trial wasn't just a battle between me and Trevor's family. It became a battleground for my own family's dysfunction, too. My mom, Kathy, was so invested in this that she hired her own lawyer to protect our family's reputation, whatever that means. She started doing these bizarre things, like setting up meetings with reporters to give exclusive interviews about our side of the story. At one point, she even suggested that we countersue Linda for emotional damage caused by raising a narcissist. Meanwhile, my brother Ethan decided that this was the perfect time to air all his grievances about Trevor, the family, and life in general. He showed up to court drunk one day and tried to pick a fight with Trevor in the hallway. It took 3 bailiffs to pull him off, and he ended up spending a night in jail for contempt of court. My dad, Bob, just kept his head down and tried to stay out of it, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. The whole thing was a mess. In the end, the case was dismissed, and Richard was ordered to pay my legal fees. But the real victory was seeing the look on Linda's face when the judge called her out for her lies. It was priceless, Reddit. Absolutely priceless. Update 3. After the trial, I thought things would finally settle down. I was wrong. One day, out of the blue, I got a call from Trevor. He sounded different, humbled even. He apologized, yes, actually apologized for everything he'd put me through and admitted that he was wrong. He told me he was in therapy, trying to figure out why he'd sabotaged our relationship, and he wanted to make amends. Part of me wanted to hang up, but another part, the part that had once loved him, listened. He asked if we could meet for coffee just to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a little cafe in the city, and I barely recognized him. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the few months since our last encounter. He was sincere, or at least he seemed to be, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then he dropped the bombshell. I wanted to get back together. He said he'd changed, that he'd realized how much he loved me, and that he wanted to start over. He even suggested we go to couples therapy. I nearly choked on my latte. Was he serious? After everything that had happened, after all the lies and the cheating and the public humiliation, he thought I'd take him back? I told him, in no uncertain terms, that there was no way in hell I was getting back together with him. Not now, not ever. I'd moved on, and he needed to do the same. He looked crushed, but honestly, that wasn't my problem anymore. I walked out of that cafe feeling lighter than I had in months. But of course it didn't end there. Trevor might have been down, but he wasn't out, and his next move caught me completely off guard. About a week after our coffee meeting, I got a call from an attorney, a different one from the sleazebag Richard had hired for the defamation case. This one represented Trevor personally, and he had an offer for me. Apparently, Trevor had decided that if he couldn't win me back with apologies and therapy sessions, he'd try a different tactic. The attorney laid it out as calmly as if he were discussing the weather. Trevor was offering me a substantial sum of money to sign a non-disclosure agreement, essentially buying my silence. In exchange, I would never speak publicly about our relationship or the engagement party fiasco again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, he thought he could just pay me off? Like I was some kind of inconvenience he could brush under the rug with a big enough check? The audacity of it was almost laughable. Almost. I told the attorney exactly where he could shove Trevor's money and hung up. But the anger stayed with me. It wasn't just that Trevor had tried to bribe me. It was the realization that he hadn't changed at all. Despite all his talk about therapy and making amends, he was still the same manipulative, arrogant jerk he'd always been. That's when I decided I wasn't done yet. I still had more to say, and I wasn't about to let Trevor or his family silence me. I reached out to a journalist who had been hounding me for an interview ever since the engagement party. I'd turned him down before, not wanting to fan the flames, but now I was ready to tell my side of the story. The interview was a no-holds-barred expose. I laid everything out. Trevor's cheating, his family's obsession with reputation, the lawsuit, and the bribe. I didn't hold back, and the journalist ate it up. The story went live the following week, and it was explosive. The public was already fascinated by the scandal, and this was the final nail in the coffin. The comment section was filled with people calling Trevor out, praising me for standing up to him, and speculating about what kind of person would try to bribe their ex-fiancé into silence. Linda predictably lost her mind. I got a flurry of threatening texts and emails from her, all trying to intimidate me into retracting the story. But I didn't care. I was done being afraid of her, done letting her control the narrative. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. The fallout was more than just tabloid fodder, though. Trevor's family started losing business deals left and right. One of Richard's biggest partners, a tech billionaire with a squeaky clean public image, pulled out of a major project, citing moral concerns. Their stock plummeted, and suddenly, they weren't the golden family of their social circle anymore. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Meanwhile, my mom, Kathy, decided to cash in on the chaos. She started writing a book, Mother of the Bride, the untold story of love, loss, and scandal. It's as cringe-worthy as it sounds, and I begged her not to do it, but she was determined. She claimed it was her way of coping, but I knew better. She was chasing fame, just like Linda had been. The whole thing just made me sick. As for my brother Ethan, he finally managed to get his act together, somewhat. He moved out of our parents' house and got a job in real estate, flipping houses. He's not rolling in dough, but he's doing okay. We don't talk much anymore, though. The whole ordeal with Trevor drove a wedge between us that hasn't healed. I think he blames me for some of what happened, and maybe he's right. I don't know. It's complicated. Final update. It's been about a year since the engagement party, and I'm in a much better place now. I've started my own business, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had the courage to pursue while I was with Trevor. I'm dating someone new, someone kind, supportive, and, most importantly, honest. My family has been amazing through all of this, especially my mom, who has a special talent for knowing exactly when I need a pep talk and when I need a glass of wine. As for Trevor, last I heard, he's still in therapy and trying to piece his life back together. Linda and Richard have all but disappeared from the social scene, and their family's reputation is in tatters. I guess that's what happens when you build your life on lies and deception. It all comes crashing down eventually. Looking back, I can't believe how much has changed in such a short time. I went from planning a wedding to exposing one of the most powerful families in our town, all because I refused to let them walk all over me. And you know what? I'm proud of myself. I stood up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy, and I came out stronger on the other side. So, Reddit, that's my story. It's been a wild ride, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't let other people define your worth. No amount of money, no fancy parties, and no social status can make up for the things that really matter, like honesty, respect, and self-worth. Thanks for listening.